What's up everyone, welcome back to Ask Dan Anything with my brand new selfie stick. Something I promised myself I'd never buy, and here I am buying one. So we've got a question today from a former client of mine, Emma, and she asks, how can I manage a conversation with someone who dominates it, or interrupts my stories with their own and doesn't really listen to me? I'm introverted and find myself withdrawing during conversations with people like this, and then I hide from them later to avoid interacting with them. I'm sure many people out there who identify as introverted will relate to this. And anybody really can relate to somebody who dominates the social interaction and doesn't let them get a word in. This can also take many forms. It can take someone who's just kind of extremely extroverted and gregarious and just dominates a conversation. It can be the kind of person who pours out a flood of misery and woe and kind of traps you with their dumping. And it can be someone who just can't seem to shut up. They just can't seem to close this thing, And a range of others. The first is to allow yourself a bit of understanding about why they do it. There's a range of reasons for why people are like this in a conversation, and some of them are due to your behavior, and some of them are just naturally their personality. First is the dominant person, so the gregarious extrovert. This person doesn't mean to prevent you from speaking. They're just compelled to share every thought that comes into their mind, and they may have trained themselves to develop an entertaining persona. They feel that they need to be the center of attention, and they feel compelled by this identity that they've created, which came long before you. That's got nothing to do with you. This is the kind of person who does this in all situations, unless they find themselves in the presence of an even more alpha person and they kind of back down. So a dominant person, and this person might just be excited to share. So if somebody's doing this only in certain situations, it might be, I know some quiet introverted people who, when they get hyped up about their favorite subject, they can't shut up. It all comes pouring out of them. Or when they finally feel safe with someone, it all comes pouring out because they've been storing it inside. So there's that kind of person. Then there's a kind of person who anxiously fills the space. So there's some people that if you leave a silence, they get very uncomfortable. A silence to them is very threatening and fills them with all sorts of sense of foreboding and social awkwardness. And so they're just compelled to fill that silence with noise. So even when you stop to take a breath, even that gap of a silence bothers them and they'll fill it. These are the kind of person who interrupts you whenever you seem to come to a space. And then there's others who are trying to help. They think that you need them to fill the space because you're so quiet. They feel this kind of judgmental desire to fix you, or they even come from a compassionate place where they've made the judgmental assumption that you don't know how to fill the silence yourself, so they'll do it for you, and then a kind of a pattern develops with you over time where they constantly do a lot of the talking. I quite often myself fall into this space when I'm with a quiet person. I just can't seem to shut up. So there's a range of things from kind of healthy reasons through to insecurity that somebody might behave this way. And trying to figure out which one they are can go a long way to resolving your own issues with this. Because you'll realize they're not actually trying to harm you. They're dealing with their own insecurities, and this is the behavior as a consequence of that. The second thing I really want to say about this, you labeled yourself an introvert. I know a lot of people who label themselves as introvert or extrovert. And these are labels that I'm really not too fond of because they're so general and so broad that they cannot accurately apply to any one individual. If you really are introverted, that means that you'll never be able to interact in an extroverted way, and that's just not true. You can do it. So don't let labels control you. You can be an outgoing introvert in certain moments. I mean, when I first got assessed with the Big 5 personality test, a highly validated, reliable test for psychology, it put me as an introvert. I did the same test 10 years later and it put me as an extrovert. You're not even supposed to move on those scales. if you answer the test honestly. It's supposed to capture your personality for life. And yet in 10 years' time, I went from introvert to extrovert. And what I realise now is that I'm neither, and both. It depends on the context. I can be quiet and listen and thoughtful and need time alone to relax. And I can be on stage and present a seminar and argue boisterously and relax in the company of other people. I can do all of those things because there is no rule that says I can't. So when you call yourself an introvert, odds are you're giving yourself a set of rules you have to follow that include being silent, being quiet in a conversation, taking a long time to respond, and you don't actually have to do any of that stuff. You've just forced that stuff upon yourself based on a kind of predisposition you have. Now let's come to actually dealing with these people. I think the first and foremost, the most powerful way to deal with people like this is to set expectations. And I would apply this to any problem you're having with conversations. If you have this withdrawing tendency during conversations with dominant people, tell them about it. Give them guidance on how they can help you interact more equally and respectfully in this relationship. Tell them you need time to think. Tell them that if they're going to tell you things, that they should tell you things one at a time rather than giving it to you all at once. Tell them that sometimes you take big silences during a story and you need them to let you finish. Those silences aren't the end of the story. Tell them all this stuff. That in itself will be a highly connecting conversation. They might be able to tell you their things too. If you don't set those expectations, you can't expect them to behave in a certain way. They will just default to their autopilot. Then there's setting boundaries. Whether you've had the chance to set expectations or not, setting boundaries can always occur. Setting boundaries goes a lot easier when you've already set expectations because you're just reminding them of those. But setting boundaries can happen any time. And one of the first ways to do this is to call out any manipulation that you're seeing. You don't have to call it manipulation because it's a highly loaded word. But if someone's interrupting you a lot, or dismissing your stories or not listening to you, that is a form of manipulation, a form of aggression and intimidation. And what you can do is just call out how it makes you feel as a way to set boundaries. So as somebody interrupts you, you can just be like, whoa, you kind of interrupted me there and I lose my train of thought when people don't let me finish. You can just say that. You can say, look, I'd love to keep talking to you, but I find it hard because you're kind of dominating the conversation. I've got all these ideas I want to share with you, but I can't find space to get a word in. What's really important here is to learn how to say stop. Extroverts don't mind being stopped. They don't mind someone interrupting them because they can actually be a relief for them a lot of the time. You know, sometimes I can go on and on. When somebody goes, can you just stop for a second? I'm like, oh, thank God. You know, because they've taken on the burden of running the conversation. A lot of them don't actually want that burden. Some of them do, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them would love a 50-50 interaction, and they're so used to not having it that they've just resigned themselves to having to lead. So what you can actually do is say, stop for a second. You know, if this is a great one when somebody's made one point and then they start moving on to the next one or repeating themselves. You can go, oh, stop. Let me just come back to that first point because I'm getting lost here. Or hold on, you lost me at blah, blah, blah. Just wait a second. Just stop. Really, it's not rude to do this. Actually, you're helping them understand where you're at in the conversation. For the kind of people who drag out a conversation and pour things out from a place of insecurity, often they do this because they think they've lost your attention. They're worried that you're not entertained. They're worried that you're not with them. And they're trying to keep you with this endless babble. And what you can do by saying stop is give them the understanding, oh shit, I am actually being listened to. I can relax a bit here. This person has stopped me because they're listening to me. And the last point I'd make, and this is probably the most powerful approach you can take, is reflective listening. Reflective listening, this can come after you say stop, is where you actually reflect back to them what you've heard. And this will help them really see proof that they are being listened to. And for all of the personality types I mentioned, all of them essentially are trying to be listened to. And when you show that that's happening, not only do you get an opportunity to now contribute to the conversation, they will relax their domination of it. To kind of sum this up, You have to tell people how you want to interact with them, what suits you, what's best for you. You have to tell them this. They're not going to read your mind, and if you leave a silence, they will probably fill it. If you can tell them, hey, let's just be silent for a bit. Sometimes I like to think for a few seconds before I respond, so you've got to give me that space to be silent. If they know that that silence isn't going to threaten them in some way, it isn't going to come back and hurt them, they're going to be a lot more open to it happening. So, if you want more information on that, the 3x Confidence and Authenticity Masterclass program has a whole section on how to interact with people, especially how to live by the value of respect and how to balance investment in a conversation and an interaction. It's a great question, Emma. I appreciate it. For those of you who have questions like this that you want me to have a crack at, dan@brojo.co.nz. I've waitlisted them all. I'm going through them one at a time. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, pass these ideas around, and I'll see you all next time.